Across the country, people are worried about the cost of living crisis. Prices are rising every day, and each weekly shop or trip to the petrol station is leading to anxiety and stress for many. And we know that over the course of this year, things will only get worse. Petrol costs will rise further, food prices are going up, and energy bills will rise by at least £700. Both of Scotland's governments need to be doing much more to help. We have published detailed plans for action from both the UK and Scottish governments. Next week in the Spring Statement, the Tory government must cut VAT on fuel bills, scrap the national insurance increase, reverse the cut to universal credit and introduce a windfall tax on oil and gas companies making billions with the money going directly into people's pockets. Will the First Minister finally instruct our MPs to back Labour's plans?
First Minister.
My MPs in the House of Commons just yesterday led a debate calling for a windfall tax, not just on oil and gas companies, but on any company that had made substantially increased profits as a result either of the current global situation or indeed of the effects of the pandemic. They literally led that call in the House of Commons yesterday, and I've made clear my views on that in response to Anas Sarwar previously. I hope we can unite in this Parliament to call on the Chancellor next week to make very substantial and significant interventions to help the families across Scotland and indeed across the UK who are struggling with the rising cost of living. For our part, although our powers and resources are very limited, we will continue to do everything we can, including, of course, the 6% increase in the benefits under the control of Social Security Scotland that was announced yesterday. So we will take the action we can, but across this Parliament, all of us should be calling on the Chancellor to do much, much more when he gets to his feet in the House of Commons next week.
Anas Sarwar.
Well, SNP MPs clearly didn't get the memo because repeatedly they were asked yesterday in Westminster whether they backed a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, and repeatedly they refused to confirm that they do. So they didn't back a costed plan for a windfall tax on multinational oil and gas companies, but they did present one paragraph that would have taxed IrnBru and Pets at home. I have no idea why the SNP back a tax on ginger but not on gas. I think, frankly, Scotland deserves better. The Scottish Government has the power to act too. Had the SNP followed just one of our proposals, this is serious, Mr Swinney, so perhaps you should listen. Had the SNP followed just one of our proposals, those most in need would have been receiving £400 directly into their bank accounts. But instead, the SNP flagship cost of living policy is to copy the Tory policy and provide £150 through a council tax rebate, a policy that the Poverty Alliance has called misguided, a missed opportunity and deeply disappointing. And now we learn that not a single person in Scotland will receive £150 in April. Instead, almost every council will have to split this over 10 months. That means the Scottish Government's flagship cost of living policy is worth just £15 for the next 10 months. At the same time, Which have said this morning that Scottish families will be spending an extra £84 a month on food and fuel. First Minister, people are struggling right now. How can you possibly believe this is good enough?
First Minister.
First, in terms of the £150 payment, and the Finance Secretary set this out very clearly, because of the limited powers and limited control over the data around this that we have done it in a way that gets help to people as quickly as possible, rather than it taking months and months and months. Of course, where we hold the power, we are doing so much more. We are doubling the Scottish child payment, for example, helping lowest income families with children. We, unlike the government south of the border, have protected the council tax reduction scheme so that there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of households across Scotland who don't pay any council tax at all. So where we have the power, we use that power, and where the power is limited, unfortunately, we can't act in the way that we would want. Which brings me back to the windfall tax. Because I don't know whether Anas Sarwar actually read the motion that was tabled in the House of Commons by SNP MPs yesterday, calling for a windfall tax on any and all companies that have made increased profits, which would include oil and gas. But why? And this is perhaps something that Anas Sarwar might want to reflect on. Yes, let's include oil and gas, but why would he want to exclude Amazon, for example, from that approach? But coming back, my final point, Presiding Officer, is this. Wouldn't it be so much better, rather than Anas Sarwar standing up week after week asking for my views on something I have no control to do, Rather that, wouldn't it be better if Anas Sarwar would argue for these powers actually to be in the hands of this government in the first place?
Anas Sarwar.
I hate to break it to the First Minister. The cost of living crisis is right now. There isn't an independent answer or constitutional answer to this question. People's bills are going up whether they voted yes or no. And simply just pointing at the Tories and saying, well, they could have acted but not using their own powers here simply isn't good enough. Because what the First Minister says on £150 is simply not true. They could have used that more progressively, as the Poverty Alliance has said. And what she says on the windfall tax isn't true. Repeatedly, SNP MPs were asked to confirm whether a windfall tax would include oil and gas companies, and repeatedly they refused to do so. Why? Why on the side of the big oil and gas companies and not on the side of people paying their bills? Because, Presiding Officer, people's energy bills are going up by £700. Fuel is estimated to go up to over £2 a litre. Food prices are on the rise, and at the same time we have two governments lacking ambition, failing to back a windfall tax on the big energy companies that put money in people's pockets, failing to use its budget to support those most in need, making it worse by hiking rail fares and water charges, and failing to back detailed and costed plans just because they come from Labour. This crisis is only getting worse. Warm words won't keep the bills down. This government must step up to the challenge that Scots face right now. Stop tinkering around the edges and provide the support the people of Scotland need.
First Minister.
The power, we're using the power. We are doubling the Scottish child payment. The game-changer policy, according to child poverty campaigners. So where we have the powers, we use that power. But Anas Sarwar says the argument about powers doesn't matter. He has chosen to come here today and major on the issue of a windfall tax. This government doesn't have the power to impose a windfall tax. And let me be very clear, the motion tabled in the House of Commons yesterday by SNP MPs would include oil and gas companies. Any reading of that would lead anyone to that conclusion. But here, in the interest, because this is a really serious issue for families across the country, so in the interest of trying to build consensus, I will prepare and sign this afternoon a joint letter with Anas Sarwar to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, asking if they would pass us, asking them to do a windfall tax, but asking them, because I suspect their answer will be no, to give the power to this Parliament to do it at our own hand. And then we can join forces and ensure that is actually done with oil and gas companies and with Amazon and with other companies that have increased. So rather than just indulge in the rhetoric, will Anas Sarwar actually argue for the means for this Parliament to do it?